Pam Bondi has linked a 2012 disappearance to Diddy's dark gatherings. The judge sentenced Diddy to life in jail without the possibility of parole as the courtroom descended into complete mayhem. Could this be the trial has finally concluded, and Attorney General Pam Bondi stared at the smoking gun that no one saw coming. Her phone is red stringing documents and photos at the evidence board in her office like a spider's web. Buzzed with a second CNN call, but she chose to ignore it because the Diddy trial had took up 8 months of her life, and now she had the final piece she needed. Ma'am, as her aide Sarah Chen remarked, Detective Miguel Rodriguez is here with the forensics report. Pam, you won't believe this. The DNA from the 2012 missing, Rodriguez said, his wrinkled visage sad. Bondi's pulse accelerated, which is consistent with Combs' features. Jessica Martinez, a 19-year-old Miami resident, vanished after leaving. When her blood was discovered in Combs' Star Island mansion cellar, Jesus Christ Bondi seized her. Coffee hands quivering a little. How strong is this bond? Rodriguez moved a heavy folder across her desk, revealing blood and rock-solid hair fibers. Even remnants of the same unusual lubricants discovered at the so-called Sarah stuck her head in again after the lab ran it 3 times for freak-off parties. Bondi picked up the phone, and Marcus Williams, the defense lawyer, is also online and says it's important. Williams' voice sounded strained, so if you're phoning to negotiate, it's too late. The client desires a complete confession in exchange for life without parole rather than death. We're going for life and getting it. Bondi hung up, and there won't be any penalties. I asked Rodriguez how many more cases of missing persons are we considering. A minimum of 6 that we can link to his parties from 2010 to 2023. Every young woman last spotted at Combs related or his Bondi's associates were upset because she had prosecuted numerous high-profile cases. However, the extent of it and the deliberate character of the offenses were different. We must summon Judge Harrison right away since Combs utilized his celebrity status as a pretext. Regarding tomorrow's hearing, Rodriguez nodded, but there's still more. The FBI discovered video evidence at his Los Angeles property, where Combs recorded all of the victims' assaults. How many videos out of 200 hours of filming were cleaned up afterwards? Bondi closed her eyes on 23 victims during a 12-year period, had come forward thus far, but there might be dozens more if Rodriguez was correct. Her phone rang during a trial that had begun as a racketeering case and was now the biggest serial crime investigation in decades. The judge wants to see Miss Bondi. Judge Harrison's clerk, this time. Tell Mr. Williams that you and he will be in chambers in half an hour, Bondi. Miguel, I need you to work with the families they need, so I took her jacket. To be aware before this makes the news, but Pam, there's an addition. Tony Castellanos, a private investigator that the Martinez family hired in 2012, has been following this case for 11 years. Call him. If he has any material we didn't hear, I want it before Rodriguez is on his way to the door when we enter that courtroom tomorrow. Bondi stared out her window at the Miami skyline, and it seems like this is going to ruin him. Families were still, waiting for answers regarding their lost loved ones in the skyline. Tony Castellanos had been waiting 11 years for his girls, and it should have crushed him years ago. His small office, located above a Cuban eatery in Little Havana, was crammed, with boxes of police had written off witness accounts and proof photos as conspiracy theories. This is Pam Bondi. Mr. Castellanos, I am aware that you have been looking into the Tony's gruff voice conveyed decades of grief over Jessica Martinez's abduction. I have been yelling about Sean Combs for more than 10 years, lady, and I am frustrated with the investigation. No one wants to listen, but we are listening right now. Could you please join us? I'll be in my office in an hour, and when Tony got there, he wheeled in. Detective Rodriguez and Prosecutor Janet Morrison on a cart filled with file boxes as Tony laid up his materials. Bondi joined him in the conference room. Jessica Martinez wasn't just any old person. Tony started indicating that she was specifically on a time frame he had created. Scouted modeling agencies, dance studios, and young individuals in the area. Aspiring women gathered, and Morrison leaned forward to you. Possess evidence of this hiring process. Tony produced a battered notepad. Marcus Thompson, Comum's former bodyguard, was sacked in 2013 for making excessive requests. Where is Thompson now, Bondi? He kept records, inquired about a fatal vehicle accident in 2015, but his sister Tony, who had preserved his notes, pushed a photocopied paper across the table. Take a look at these names and dates. Rodriguez looked over the list. All of these instances are missing persons from South America. How did you link the same pattern each time young ladies aspired? Florida. Local authorities treated performers who were last spotted at parties or gatherings associated with bad boy entertainment, as anger was rising in Runaway's Bondi's chest. Why didn't you bring this to Tony? The FBI laughed sourly before. You believe? I didn't try. Commies gave millions to police foundations, charities, and politicians. He had contacts everywhere, and I was just a private dick with an ex-cop. Morrison was frantically writing notes on wild theories, telling us about the comms would invite dozens of young women to what he called networking meetings, which were really hunting grounds. Them, with drink and narcotics, then picked the most susceptible for his personal use. Internally, they referred to them as sessions the freak-offs, Rodriguez claimed. However, it was more than simply sex. It was psychological agony, dominance, and control. We discovered films of systematic abuse intended to destroy these women's self-esteem. Bondi looked at a picture of what happened to Jessica Martinez, a stunning young lady with optimistic eyes. According to Thompson's notes, Jessica's voice became subdued, especially Tony's. She tried to depart at one of these meetings and threatened to call the police, which is when the violence started. Her blood was discovered at several places on the Rodriguez home on Star Island, an additional master bedroom in the basement, and what looks to be a soundproofed, looking up from her notes, room. Morrison asked, "How many others do you think are out?" Tony pointed to his conservative evidence boxes. At least 30 young women during a 15-year period are estimated. Some may have been slain, while others may have. Trafficking Bondi's stomach after being sold into trafficking networks turned Comum's possessed links to global networks, private aircraft, offshore accounts, and nations lacking extradition treaties, and this wasn't merely for his own satisfaction. It was. When the business Rodriguez phone rang, he picked it up, listened, and then hung up with a gloomy face. It was the lab where the DNA of Jessica Martinez was discovered on 3 additional properties. Tony nodded regretfully. She fought and left traces, held by Combs or his shell companies. Bondi stood up, her mind racing, hoping that someone would finally piece it together. Please attest to everything you just told us, Tony. After 11 years of being disregarded in front of a jury, I want you to receive justice, so I'm willing to wager everything on 12 strangers. Will you do it, Jessica and everyone else? Tony glanced at the picture of, when should we begin hiring defense lawyer Marcus Williams to represent Jessica Martinez again? Knew his career was coming to an end, so he paced his hotel suite at 3 in the morning. Sean Diddy Commies, his client, had deceived him from the beginning, and now the prosecution, his co-counsel, Rebecca Torres, was seated at the desk and possessed material that rendered their racketeering case appear insignificant. Examining the most recent discovery materials, Marcus, we must talk about our alternatives available to our client, a serial killer who keeps a record of his crimes. David Sterling, Combs' business manager, hurried as the hotel room door exploded on camera. We need to discuss. Williams held with 2 other companions. Raised his hand. David. The lawyer client is now covering anything you say to me. Privilege. But if you're here to urge me to do something outside the law, I'm warning you. Sterling's pricey suit was crumpled, and his normally immaculate appearance was disturbed. Sean wants to reach an agreement with full disclosure of the names of the accomplices. Torres searched her files for the locations of other victims, and all they had given up in exchange for life without parole. We must make it sweeter because the prosecution has already turned down that offer. Sean, a longtime aide of Kevin Walsh Combs, is aware of the burial locations. Williams was genuinely appalled by the sheer quantity of bodies, Kevin. I'm not sure how many. However, there are homes in the Bahamas, Mexico, and Colombia where they're solved issues. Jesus Christ, Williams sagged into a chair. You're discussing numerous murder victims worldwide. Borders Sterling took out his phone and, was ready to provide the FBI with all of the bank data and property deeds, names of all the participants, including the politicians, judges, and law enforcement stopped typing politicians. Sean paid for protection and accepted bribes. Corruption has persisted for more than 20 years among mayors, senators, police commissioners, and Williams comprehended why Bondi had been so assured on the phone all the way to Washington. Was no longer only about Combs, it was also about revealing a whole network of collusion and corruption. When his phone rang, it was Mr. Williams, the judge's clerk. Desire to see all attorneys at the emergency hearing at 6 a.m. After hanging up, Williams turned to Sterling. I must have a straight conversation with Sean tonight as he is present at the correctional facility. For his own safety, the center set up solitary confinement, and David does whatever Sean says. Williams sat down an hour later, and I will decide tonight whether to remain his lawyer or step aside. In a stark interview room next from Combs, the man who had once inspired dread and reverence throughout the entertainment business appeared desperate and shattered, with the statement, Marcus, they're going to kill. Combs whispered, Sean, I need you to let me know if this goes to trial. The reality of it all, how many people have died as a result of, I stopped counting once you closed his eyes. Homicides, some accidental, 20 girls who felt the room spin overdosed at the parties, but some retaliated and threatened to reveal. Sterling Walsh is my security. Therefore, we couldn't allow that to occur. Crew, we occasionally engaged other contractors to help with the cleanup. Williams recognized that he was Jessica Martinez, who may be seated across from one of the most active serial killers in American history. In reality, she threatened to upload a recording of one of the sessions she made on her phone online. When I was in New York, she handled it the way Combs met his eyes, unless we gave her millions of sterling. You are aware that Williams said, I can no longer represent you in this conversation, Sean. Is over, Marcus. Hold on. I can take down half of Florida's judges and legislators who rigged cases, prosecutors who concealed evidence, and police officers who ignored. Williams hesitated at the door, asking if it was worth it to protect then. Williams contacted Torres Rebecca to get ready for our pullout as he left the jail facility. Judge Margaret Harrison presided over the move to dismiss this lawsuit as of tomorrow morning. Years in federal court, but nothing had prepared her for the 6-hour emergency hearing. As lawyers gathered outside her clerk's office in the morning, she sat in her chambers going over the prosecution's fresh evidence. Patricia Wong brought coffee, ma'am. The defense and prosecution teams are put Collins through first. Additionally, FBI Director Collins is on the line. Your Honor, this case involves national security. Director Collins' voice sounded strained. Implications. How far does this go, Director? We're looking into corruption that affects several government departments. Although our investigation is ongoing, initial data points to bribery to federal judges, senators, and potentially Supreme Court employees. We must work with your court to make sure that this inquiry doesn't jeopardize. Judge Harrison stroked her temples during ongoing operations. Are you requesting that I postpone procedures, ma'am? We need your help managing confidential information that might reveal ongoing. FBI Harrison called the lawyers. Pam Bondi, after hanging up, arrived with her team, and Combs was represented by a tense-looking public defender called James Fletcher. After Harrison started with Williams' withdrawal, Miss Bondi, I know you have new evidence. Your Honor, we've linked the defendant to a minimum of 6 homicides over a 12-year period and additional proof of dozens of public officials involved in a corruption network. Fletcher was obviously overpowered, spoke up in Your Honor. I need time to analyze this as my client merely hired me 12 hours ago. Proof that you have been honoring Mr. Fletcher for at least 6 months. The prosecution is making accusations of crimes in numerous jurisdictions with thousands of bits of proof that Bondi stood up for Your Honor. In his withdrawal request, Mr. Williams states that the defendant has already admitted to several killings to his former lawyer. Harrison had seen an affidavit in which his client acknowledged committing more than 20 murders. The most unsettling paper she had ever seen in her professional life was motion that morning. Mr. Fletcher has your client, talked with you about these accusations, and he has consistently maintained his innocence. Charges, Your Honor, which is intriguing since I have a tape of the imprisonment here. Senator Harrison provided a little audio snippet of Comems discussing tying up loose ends with another prisoner. Fletcher's face turned pale. "And in your honor, I ask for a break so that I can talk to my client," rejected Mr. Fletcher. "Your client has been given several chances to. After the lawyers left Harrison, we're moving forward with the trial on Monday. I'm waiting on a case and need assistance. So I called her old buddy, retired Judge William Carter Bill. Maggie, you know what you have to do. Obey the law and protect the victims. That may bring down half of the administration and let things unfold naturally." What if abiding by the law implies? For a while, Carter remained silent about exposing corruption that undermines our entire legal system. Harrison assessed the victim that afternoon, so perhaps our system has to be destabilized. Impact statements. 23 families sent in letters detailing their losses. The Martinez family statement, which included daughters, sisters, and friends, was especially devastating after 11 years of her phone rang, and it was Chief Justice Roberts. She was praying and wondering for answers. Chief Justice Harrison's office would want to talk to you about. Harrison was frightened by the Comems case when the court was becoming involved, and the level of corruption exceeded her expectations. "Tell the Chief Justice I'll call him back when the trial is over, ma'am. He was really demanding that you talk to him today. He could be a little let down." Whatever pressure was coming, Day Harrison hung up and locked her office door. She refused to allow it to affect her choices. 23 victims are entitled to justice, even if doing so required dismantling the entire rotten system that had safeguarded there. She took out a picture of Jessica Martinez and put it on her desk next to her gavel, saying, "Justice delayed is as she prepared for the battle of her career," she said. "Justice denied." In a safe house, FBI agent Sarah Kim was seated across from Maria Santos. Having worked as Cole's personal assistant for 8 years, Virginia Santos was physically aware of the locations of all the bodies' graves. Quote, "Maria, we need you to provide testimony regarding what you saw during," Kim remarked softly to Santos, a small woman in her 30s, "the freak-off parties. Agent Kim, you don't understand if I testify that I'm dead." She trembled as she spoke. "Sean has contacts everywhere, so we can safeguard your new identity, relocate it, and provide you with the entire program. Cannot shield me from his contacts." He paid judges, senators, police leaders, and Kim recognized Santos' dread in her, "And I know you haven't been bought." During her 15 years with the FBI, she had never witnessed such widespread corruption. "I have been looking into Comems for 3 years. Would I be here attempting to persuade you to buy me?" Eduardo Santos took out an old notebook in which I recorded names, dates, and other information. "What happened to the girls that vanished? I always assumed that I would require insurance at some point. Tell me about Jessica." "Jessica was different. She was powerful and intelligent." Martinez Santos's eyes were full with tears. "At one of the gatherings, you became aware of what was going on and attempted to flee. Did you witness Combs and his security? When the crew discovered her attempting to flee, they pulled her to the basement, where I heard screams for approximately an hour." Kim felt nauseous, yet she persisted with what transpired. "After that, David Sterling instructed me to burn Jessica's clothing and clean the basement while he told me to forget I ever met Jessica and that she had been taken care of. Did you see her body?" "No, but around 3 in the morning, I observed Sterling and 2 other men carrying a large carpet into a van. The carpet was staining." Kim took notes on who else was there when these Santos's journal was filled with occurrences, and Kevin Walsh was constantly present, filmed everything, followed by the usual visitors, politicians, and celebrities. "Can you identify individual corporate executives who paid to attend the parties?" Texas Senator Robert Hayes frequently visited, as did Mayor Davidson from Circuit Court. Judge Patricia Reeves of Miami's Penn stopped Judge Reeves from having speculated to be appointed to the Supreme Court. You may be sure that Judge Reeves took part in the actions and accepted bribes to get the cases against Sean's acquaintances dropped. The repercussions were staggering if a federal judge was in office at the time, which clarified how comb shaving gone unpunished for so long, Santos added. There were others. Additionally, Homeland Security Sean, DEA officials, and FBI agents. referred to it as High's insurance policy. Maria, please tell me who these individuals are. From Santos spent the next 2 hours looking through FBI data, eventually identifying corrupt officials through the photos. They had proof that more than 40 government workers at different levels were involved. Kim's phone flashed with a text. Santos's safe home was compromised by Director Collins. Maria, we must leave right away. What's wrong? Someone leaked your location pack. Only necessities as they hurried to the car, and Kim noticed unmarked cars all around them. As she sped toward the highway Santos, she called for assistance from the safe house. I told you this would happen, and I was crying when Sean's people discovered me. Government officials attempting to shield their own. Kim were unaware of how crooked Sean's people were. She took a choice that might have lost her career, because she believed that not even the FBI could be fully trusted. This is Agent Kim. Pam Bondi, Mrs. Bondi. We have your star witness, but there's a problem. A law enforcement official is attempting to quiet. Where are you now going north on I-95, huh? I need a safe place to hide. Santos. I will have private security at my home until the trial. Kim realized that the Combs trial was coming as she drove through the night, had grown into a much bigger conflict for the very essence of American justice. As news vans lined the street during the Combs trial, CNN legal analyst Rebecca Martinez stood outside the federal courthouse. Has grown to be the most watched court case since the O.J. Simpson case. The jury selection process for Sean Combs in the United States starts this morning, but she informed the court that this trial had already revealed corruption at the highest levels of government. Using a video inside the courthouse, prosecutor Janet Morrison went over the evidence, and her opening statement one last time was overwhelming. But she was certain that Combs' remaining supporters would attempt to undermine. Detective Rodriguez hurried over 3 of our problems. Janet. Last night, Tony Castellanos and Maria Santos, one of our witnesses, got death threats. William Jackson Morrison, a former bodyguard, felt her stomach drop. Are they? Yes, I am still willing to testify against Jackson and Castellanos, but Santos is so afraid that she is requesting additional security assurances at the public defense table. Sean Combs, who was facing life in prison, was incredibly composed while seated with counsel. James Fletcher had employed Danny Morrison, a private investigator, to undermine prosecution witnesses. Sean, we must talk about plea possibilities once more. Fletcher muttered, no deals. Didn't make it through 30 years in this industry to fail, and now the evidence against you is. Combs grinned at the overwhelming 23 victims' video footage and DNA evidence. Coldly, James, half of the players in this game don't grasp how it works. Judge Harrison entered the courtroom and said, you owe me favors. The other half are afraid of what I know about them. Silently, as the crowded gallery and courtroom tumbled, and media representatives crowded the first 3 rows, ladies and gentlemen, while the area behind the prosecution table was occupied by victim relatives. Before we start, I want to talk about security. We're here to choose a jury for the United States versus Sean Combs match. Harrison's worries were directed at the defendant, Mr. Combs, who I received allegations of witness intimidation if someone close to you tries to sway this trial by making threats or coercion. I will personally hold you accountable for your honor. My client affirms his innocence and has not approved of any attempts at intimidation. Fletcher replied to ensure that it remains in this manner. The jury selection process started with 200 possible jurors, one by one, asked about their familiarity with the case, their capacity for objectivity, and their ties to the entertainment Morrison. An industry prosecutor concentrated on selecting jurors who could tolerate graphic evidence and would not be influenced by, can a well-known person be found guilty if the evidence is beyond a reasonable doubt? Fletcher, the doubt defense lawyer, sought out jurors who would be dubious of government cases. Do you think that celebrities are occasionally unfairly targeted by law police by the afternoon they were seated? 8 jurors and were having trouble recruiting 4 more. A lot of prospective jurors expressed fears about their safety or acknowledged that they had preconceived notions regarding Combs' culpability during a recess. Pam Bondi got a call from We Intercepted Communications, said FBI Director Collins. Pam, implying an effort to buy off jurors who are still investigating. But can you demonstrate that the money trail points to shell corporations associated with Combs' economic empire? Judge, Combs hasn't approved it yet, but we're working on it that evening. I have chosen to sequester the jury once Harrison called the lawyers into chambers. Fletcher objected to your award because of the amount of external pressure and media attention. Finding suitable jurors will be more difficult if you are sequestered. Mr. Fletcher, your clients, because of the intimidation tactics used by associates to create this circumstance, will move forward with following the court's adjournment. Bondi met with the family of the victims in a private conference room. Jessica Carmen, Martinez's mother, addressed on behalf of the group Miss Bondi after 11 years of waiting. Will this trial ultimately provide us with answers for justice? Bondi examined the faces of parents who lost their daughters. Mrs. Martinez, I am unable to guarantee that I will bring your girls back, but I guarantee Sean Combs won't ever harm anyone else. Family. Outside the courthouse, demonstrators waved signs as the gathering grew. Ending celebrity immunity counter-protesters and reading justice for Jessica Combs fans reportedly paid for the chants, "Free Diddy and government frame." A reporter yelled, "Miss Bondi, are you worried?" as Bondi was making her way to her car. "Will corruption in your own office be exposed by this trial?" She halted and glanced around. Worried about 23 murdered women receiving justice if that procedure reveals corruption everywhere, whether the battle lines were established for the future. Maria Santos entered the crowded courtroom during one of the most important trials in American judicial history. Federal marshals lined the courtroom following 3 days of jury selection. 12 now that the 4 alternates and jurors were sequestered. Everyone's attention was on the witness stand. Janet Morrison, the prosecutor, stood beside Ms. Santos. How did you relate to the earlier from 2015 to, I worked as Shan Kolb's personal assistant? Did you see any illegal behavior in 2023? Santos hesitated, taking a quick look at Combs, who glared back at me. Yes, I have seen killings, and tell us about Jessica's assaults during what he called freak-off parties. Martinez attended a party in October 2012 and attempted to leave when she was 19. David Sterling and Kevin Walsh pulled Sean to the basement after her security guards stopped her. Did you recognize the blood-stained crime scene photos that Morrison displayed? These stains are Jessica's blood, and I was instructed to remove them. The judge cited defense lawyer Fletcher's continuous resistance to the rumor. Morrison asked for Jessica's number, and when I asked, they said she'd been treated. Did you maintain documentation? Santos pulled up a notebook, recorded every date, name, and incident. I was afraid, but someone had to recall that Fletcher hammered you hard throughout cross-examination, and you are testifying for immunity. True, but I'm being honest. You assisted in covering up killings, which makes you are an accessory. Sean threatened to frighten me. Everyone, your defense is fear. Santos's eyes filled with tears. Judge Harrison should have assisted those girls, but instead, he called a recess. How many women do you suppose Sean Combs murdered? Morrison inquired as she turned the notepad into evidence. At least 23. As bereaved family held pictures of loved ones, a gas swept across the gallery. Tony Castanos, one subsequent private investigator, testified in his 11-year. When a timeline connected Combs to several disappearances, why didn't the police take action? Asked Morrison because Combs was protected by judges, prosecutors, police, and outside in court. Carmen Martinez questioned, are we truly receiving justice? For Pam Bondi nodded and said, tomorrow we'll show the video proof that Sean Combs. His final decision from prison that night was to go for good. Tomorrow is crucial. Remind our friends of their debt, but the walls were closing at 12 o'clock. Following the arrest of co-conspirators David Sterling and Judge Patricia Reeves, the courtroom went silent. As Morrison, the prosecution, was ready to show the most damaging video recordings discovered at Combs, Judge Harrison of Properties had granted permission for the gallery to conduct media inspections. The jury's ladies and gentlemen should solely include the family of the victims. What you're about to witness is deeply upsetting, but it's essential to comprehend the defendant's remorse. The initial video captured Jessica Martinez being pulled into Combs Mansion's basement, where her cries filled the several family members sobbed in the courtroom as jurors watched in horror. In a subtle manner, Morrison played snippets from 12 distinct videos that spanned 8 years. Each displayed Combs committing acts of violence against young ladies who had attempted to oppose or flee his. Moreover, the defendant did not only commit these offenses, he kept records of them. Defense lawyer Fletcher had limited resources for his closing argument, including the souvenirs of his victim's misery, centered on raising doubts about the evidence's chain of custody and implying that his client was being exploited as a scapegoat for a bigger conspiracy. Ladies and gents, the government is undoubtedly not my client's savior. Wants you to think that he is to blame for all of the missing women in South Florida in the past. 10 years ago, Pam Bondi herself made the closing argument for the prosecution. She was in front of the jury, and behind her were pictures of all 23 victims. For more than 15 years, Sean Combs exploited his fame and fortune to take advantage of young women who were at risk. Killed Jessica Martinez as she threatened to reveal his wrongdoings. Additional women were murdered because they were uncooperative witnesses to his Combs. Was pointed out by Depravity Bondi as not being a music mogul. Or he is an entertainment executive and a serial killer who has exploited his notoriety as a disguise. The jury deliberated his crimes for 6 hours. Upon their return, the 4 women stood with the conviction for first-degree murder in the death of Carmen Martinez collapsed in Jessica Martinez, who we found guilty. Tears as 23 counts of first-degree murder were found guilty. Judge Harrison set a hearing on witness, intimidation and racketeering conspiracy, sentencing in her chambers the following week, and then she called FBI Director Collins to find out how many evidence from this trial has led to the arrest of 47 government officials thus far, including 2 federal. The corruption involves judges, 6 prosecutors, and other law enforcement personnel. Months will pass throughout the investigation before Judge Harrison is sentenced. Said directly to Combs, "Mr. Combs, you exploited young women by abusing your position of authority. In search of a career in entertainment, you stole from 23 families and made their dreams become nightmares. Their daughters," she observed the families of the victims in the gallery. "But nothing can reunite you with your loved ones. I hope this line gives you some idea of Justice Sean Combs. I give you a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Of parole on every murder charge that must be served consecutively. You will never have the chance to hurt another person." Combs displayed no emotion. As he was, his accomplices were imprisoned. His empire had collapsed, and he was carried away in shackles. And outside the courthouse, Pam Bondi, the crooked network that shielded him, had been revealed. Told the media that today's decision makes it quite evident that fame and fortune cannot protect you from justice. Sean Combs will be imprisoned for the remainder of his life, where he Carmen Martinez represented the families of the victims, and Jessica and the other girls it took 11 years. But justice has finally been served. Rest in peace. Tony Castellano stood silently next to Jessica as the gathering dispersed. After 11 years of being disregarded and rejected, Martinez's memorial photo. The Combs trial was over, but it helped bring justice to the young woman whose disappearance had plagued him. It would have a long-term impact on American law enforcement.